rather welcome and a quick test whether you can hear as well. Back to you in a few minutes. Good afternoon and welcome. Relax, grab a cup of coffee or tea. We'll get back to you in a minute. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another edition of the monthly Internet Governance briefing, the webinar in which we review what has happened when it comes to digital policies and Internet governance in the previous month, and try to envisage what's coming in the next months in this field. It's interesting, this is the 65th edition of the monthly IG briefing run in the last, 5 years of the existence of the Geneva Internet Platform. And it is always accompanied with a newsletter. So this month it was the 50th edition of the newsletter. So quite some numbers that we can be proud of. And we're happy that you are with us also today following the developments. With me today, a couple of colleagues that will help reviewing what has happened and what's coming. Jovan Kurbalija, Director of Diplo, and Rena Gavrilovic helping with the regional updates. Daria Medic, our colleague working on the Digital Watch Observatory, the one that you can always refer to for more details. And then certainly colleagues that are assisting Marco, who will be moderating the online chat, Sorina, Arvin, Stephanie, and many others who have helped preparing this event. A reminder for you, the outline for those of you that might be first time on the webinar, I guess no one, but still. We start with the review of what has happened in the previous month, in this case, in June. We'll look at events, we'll look at the main policy developments in the form that we call barometer. We are trying to feel where the pressure is big when it comes to topics. And then we usually look into the three outstanding trends of the previous month. This time, we'll change it a little bit, and we follow the pattern that we do every year in June. Before we go for some quick break, we review actually the past 6 months and try to see how some of the estimations and forecasts that we did after the new year, whether they have come true or not. Certainly there were a lot of changes because of the unexpected pandemics, but we'll get back to that quickly. And then we will look into what's coming in July and August. That's when it comes to the global updates. At the end, we'll look into regional updates, which are also very interesting. So stay tuned with us for the next 1 hour. Moving straight to the review or overview of the main events in June. And you already probably got used to this new visual that similar to many flights, many of the events which were scheduled to take place in vivo, in situ, have been either canceled or turned to an online form. And we can see just some of the examples, or many of them have been actually postponed, like the UNESCO's World Conference, the 12th WTO Ministerial Conference, but there were quite some which were turned into online. It is expected that the ITU would certainly easily switch to online, so the ITU virtual consultations of counselors was held online. And the 23rd session of the CSTD has also taken place online. Eurodig, one of the regional internet governance forums, probably broken the ice and started with delivering online. So the entire Eurodig, which was supposed to take place in Trieste, was organized online. It's worth mentioning that the GIP, the Geneva Internet Platform, provided key messages and reporting from all the workshops and main sessions of Eurodig. So if you're interested, you can always get back to Digital Watch website for the updates from Eurodig. The second IGF 2020 open consultations and the MAG meeting are also taking place online. The open-ended working group first round of informal meetings on the draft output were taken online, and the ICANN 68 policy forum supposed to take place in Kuala Lumpur also moved online. We'll see how it goes when it comes to the July meetings, but before that, let's turn to the barometer and see what are the main policy developments in the main areas. And we'll start with the global internet governance architecture. Two main updates that we can underline. The UN Secretary General launched a roadmap for digital cooperation. We'll touch upon that a little bit later in more details, but in a nutshell, the Secretary General Antonio Guterres was basically launched the report as the roadmap, as building up on the report, the age of digital interdependence of the high-level panel on digital cooperation, which ended last year. And it addresses the recommendations on the global connectivity, digital public goods, digital inclusion, digital capacity building, digital human rights, artificial intelligence, and digital trust and security. You can see how, to what extent digital is featuring there probably in a positive context. The roadmap also highlights the strong support to the model of the IGF Plus, which was recommended or outlined in the report of the high-level panel. And it was announced that the UN will serve as a convener for a multi-stakeholder policy dialogue in future, that there will be a new envoy for technology, envoy to the Secretary General in 2021, who will provide advice on the key developments in field of digital technology. The other interesting updates is that this year's IGF, it was initially planned to be held in Poland, will be held entirely online. This will be also a very interesting experiment, but having the quite some practice of the IGF in the last decade and more on remote participation, online participation, this should be a successful, we expect it will be a successful endeavor. In the meantime, the next 3 IGFs were announced, which is quite unusual for the IGFs. So it is expected that Poland will be 2021, Ethiopia afterwards, and then Japan as the hosts of the IGF. When it comes to sustainable development, the UN Group on Information Society initiated a dialogue on the role of digitalization in the decade of action. And basically, it is in order to raise awareness of the importance of digitalization in the context of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the unique opportunity that the UN GIS presents for more effective collaboration in this area within the UN system. Number of questions explored, including how is digitalization affecting efforts for achieving SDGs that are most relevant? How can more effective collaboration within the UN system support different agencies in promoting inclusive development and so on? Moving on to the next topic. So we look at the security. Security was sort of a high pressure in the field of security this time. There were quite some accusations, and the European Commission or the President of the European Commission suggested in the bilateral dialogue with the Chinese highest level officials, the Chinese Prime Minister and President, that China was behind the cyber attacks against some hospitals in Europe during the COVID-19 crisis, and it was basically a build-up on the accusations also about the disinformation campaign. It was officially raised by the EU. The Chinese representatives in EU have denounced the accusations and asked the EU to provide more evidence for the claim. At the same time, Australia confirmed that it has been targeted by cyber attacks and sophisticated state-based cyber attack, as Prime Minister of Australia mentioned. The attack was against government, industry, political organizations, so across all the levels of the society. Yet there were no public attributions on who stands behind that. There's some speculations and responses, but you can read more on the Digital Watch related to that. Researchers have discovered a series of zero-day vulnerabilities named Ripple 20, which could affect hundreds of millions of devices. Actually, it appeared that the vulnerabilities were discovered in a specific TCP/IP level libraries, which are used across the software since 90s. And it's mainly now striking the connected devices and industry devices, but it's beyond that. It shows to be a huge endeavor to follow the supply chain and to find how many producers and vendors actually might need to do a patch or are not even aware they're using this. It shows the fragile level of or the level of fragility of the whole digital ecosystem. And then the ITU updated its guidelines on child online protection, which contain recommendations on how to protect children online, including children with disability. And the guidelines were co-authored by the ITU and the working group with a lot of authors from leading institutions active in the field. Moving on to e-commerce and the internet economy. A couple of interesting updates or important updates. The USA has suspended its participation in the international discussion on a global digital tax regime within the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, often titled as a club of the most developed countries. Yet the OECD reiterated commitments to continue working and discussing a possible multilateral agreement, and France, Italy, Spain, UK proposed to initially limit the scope of digital taxation to automated digital services. Europe, at the same time, is in a way continuing to suggest a possible digital tax on its own level. Moving on to, or in the same area, the European Commission opened antitrust investigation into Apple, and basically there were two investigations into Apple's practices. One related to the rules for app developers, which were possibly violating EU competition rules, And the second is the investigation related to Apple Pay system, again, whether it complies with the EU competition rules. In the field of digital rights, as you can see, probably two main developments to take out. One is the European Commission issued a 2-year evaluation of its General Data Protection Regulation, a famous GDPR. And according to the assessment, the GDPR has successfully met its objectives of protecting the individual's rights and personal data protection and guaranteeing the free flow of personal data. But the Commission also pointed out the degree of fragmentation and divergent approaches to the implementation of GDPR on various national levels across the EU, and there'll be a separate report which will evaluate the standards of personal data to third countries. At the same time, the Facebook announced to change some of its policies related to hate speech content, basically to ban ads that describe different groups based on descriptions such as race or immigration status as a threat, to remove content if it is determined that it incites to violence, and to label content which violates content policies, but which the company decides to keep online because the public interest value overweights the risks to them. Moving on to jurisdiction and legal issues, Germany's Federal Supreme Court demanded Facebook to stop comprehensive data collection across its platforms. And basically, it was a German case where the court confirmed a prohibition order by the German Federal Cartel Office issued in 2019 that anyone who has a Facebook account must consent to the use of their data in order to use the platform. However, Facebook collects personal information not only when using Facebook itself, but also data that the users leaves on WhatsApp, Instagram, other services, third-party apps and websites. At the same time, the French Constitutional Council ruled that key provisions of the hate speech law were unconstitutional. Last month, they passed the law aiming to combat hate speech online by requiring online platforms to remove flagged obviously unlawful hateful content within 24 hours. But it has been declared unconstitutional in its key provisions by the French Constitutional Council. And according to the court, the legislation undermines freedom of expression and communication in a way that's not necessary, adapted, and not nor proportionate. So that's something to further watch on. Moving on to the infrastructure aspects. France and Germany launched the European Data Infrastructure Project, GAIA-X, a project aimed to develop a common requirements for the European data infrastructure, and it involves representatives from 7 European countries. Basically, others are invited to join as well. According to the officials, it should serve as an open digital ecosystem to enable European companies and business models to compete globally. Then finally, moving on to the new technologies and what we are seeing in the scope of Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, etc. 2 main updates. The UN Secretary General plans to establish a multi-stakeholder advisory board on artificial intelligence. A global partnership on AI was launched. Australia, Canada, France, Germany, India, Italy, Japan, Mexico, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea, Singapore, Slovenia, the UK, the US, and the EU. So quite a wide range of partners have announced the creation of a global partnership on artificial intelligence. An international and this multi-stakeholder initiative aims at guiding the responsible developments and the use of AI, grounded in human rights, inclusion, diversity, innovation, and economic grow. The Alliance will focus on responsible AI, data governance within it, the future of work, innovations, and recommendations. And the Secretariat of the Alliance will be established at the OECD in Paris. We'll definitely monitor more on what's happening there. And the last one in this field is that the IBM announced it no longer offers general purpose facial recognition technology. Amazon introduced a 1-year moratorium on policy use of its facial recognition technology system. And then Microsoft also reiterated it will not sell facial recognition technology to police units until the adoption of a human rights-based legislation. So we are seeing the companies which are lying together towards the fair use of the facial recognition. We'll stop there. There are many more, as you could see, many more of the interesting updates. But again, I refer you to the Digital Watch Observatory for more. And then, as we announced, we'll have a slot for Q&A, and we'll collect some of your questions. So at any point, feel free to post your comments in the chat, and then my colleague Marco will follow up on that and feed into our discussion. And now we're moving to the review of the digital policies in the previous 6 months, and trying to do some sort of a forecast, if that will be possible, of what's coming till the end of the year. It was rather unexpected set of developments in this first 6 months, so I wonder to what extent we were able to even foresee what's coming. And it seems like it will be equally hard for the remaining part of the year. But I pass the floor to Jovan to guide us through the main developments, or, well, the summary, the digest of what happened in the previous 6 months and what can we expect further. Jovan, the floor is yours. You have to unmute yourself before.
Unmute myself. And
yes, that's it. Thanks.
Yes, it works better. Thank you, Vlad. I guess you can see my screen. It's great to be today at this review, 6 months review. And I will introduce the discussion with a few slides which are summarizing what has happened. And the first one, obviously, I would say apply to everybody, not only to businesses. The question of the acceleration of digital transformation in the matter of 6 months. By sheer necessity, moving to online meetings, moving to online discussions, online shopping, delivery of goods. And the second slide, which I think is important, is a statement made by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, author of the Black Swan, who basically said how you did in this pandemic as a country, a village, a business, a group, or an individual, whether emotionally, economically, or morally, is an indication on how robust you are and how fit you will be for the next decades. This is a good sort of a reflection to all of us about this evolution and learning about our organization, ourselves individually, and revisiting some of key pillars of economic, social, and political order. Therefore, this is a time, generally speaking, of the major reflections that we as a society have when it comes to all political, economic, and social issues. Now, digital issues are in the sort of core of these discussions because of the growing relevance of the tech platforms. They are relatively increasing in their financial might, of the success of internet to deliver under really increasing pressure from online meetings, remote working. Therefore, internet passed the tough test. And broader questions of the power of the tech platforms and social and economic issues that we will revisit. Now, Vlada mentioned the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, roadmap of Secretary General, which we can discuss in more details later on, after we do quick reflection of the major developments over the last 6 months, which were drafted by my colleague Stephanie. Now, one of the first major development is increasing relevance of data governance. In a way, European Union indicated this relevance by EU data strategy in February, here in Geneva, we have all series of discussion on the road to Bern via Geneva, discussion on build-up for the World Forum on data, which was supposed to be held in October this year in Bern. This is why it was the road to Bern. And then there is a quite high presence of data in the UN Secretary General roadmap. Data is considered as digital public good, and there are few concrete initiatives how to move forward on the question of data as a public good. In more detail, you can see the discussion on the protection of data from online meetings like a Zoom meeting. You know that controversies around Zoom started with the question where the Zoom stores data gathered from meetings like this one, because this data is stored. Now it triggered Diplo to start discussion on the question on need to have open source platform for online meetings, which would address the growing concerns of people about confidentiality and safety of the meetings, especially public meetings like UN meetings and the parliament meetings. Therefore, data governance is an important issue which accelerated during the COVID-19 crisis. The second one is security, cybersecurity issues. There was a political track meeting of a UN government group of experts and open-ended working group. They continue their working. As you know, it is UN cybersecurity processes are quite complex. They are more on the glacial speed, but this is the reality of the first committee dynamics in the UN. And it was a bit accelerated and changed with open-ended working group, with inclusive meetings. And I would say that glacial speed has been accelerating with these new novelties of involving civil society, businesses in discussion on cybersecurity, which was previously mainly domain of governments. COVID-19 obviously opened the many organizations and institutions for cyber attacks. What is probably novelty is that the scope of vulnerabilities extended beyond the classical critical infrastructure. Suddenly providers of the grocery, online grocery, or Amazon, or providers of online commerce become the critical infrastructure in the time of the crisis, in addition to the hospitals and other targets which Vlada mentioned. Therefore, that dynamics is extremely important. And I guess that in the next period, we'll have to accelerate further discussion on the open-ended working group. Then the third, therefore, we have data governance as a major trend, cybersecurity, and the new topic that emerged with the crisis is the question of the contact tracing apps, especially on March onwards. And now, as the societies have been trying to do two things: to contain the spread of virus, and B, to restart economic and social life. And you know, there are social distancing policies and other approaches, but one of the approaches that has emerged is technological approaches, introduction on contact tracing apps. There are different initiatives of decentralized, centralized, one which was initiated by EPFL here, not very far from Geneva in Lausanne, and then taken over by Google and Apple and implemented, and that discussion is extremely rich. We are seeing one of the problems that while contact tracing apps will be used by many governments, and when I would say there is no objection to the use of in general, of the contact tracing app, because they create this interplay between containing the virus and enabling social and economic life. Well, there is a global sort of agreement in making. There is no space where one can discuss numerous policy aspects of contact tracing apps, from privacy protection, standards, interoperability. What if you use one contact tracing app in your country and you move across the border? What about compatibility with the other system? And it is, I would say, ideal solution, ideal situation for the UN or governance platform or IGF Plus or whatever we come through, to create a space where people can come and discuss contact tracing apps in interdisciplinary way. It is triggered by health crisis, but it is not necessarily health issue. It's security, it's standardization, it's human rights, it's economic, and to some extent sociocultural, because the acceptance of contact tracing app will depend on the societies worldwide. At Diplo, we have been following that carefully with the survey of all initiatives globally. You can find it on Digital Watch, analysis of national laws, practices, but this is a big issue which is emerging in digital policy. The fourth major trend is taxation. Taxation is the old policy issue, and there were basically three types of solutions that are considered. Global solution, hopefully agreed by at least some countries, majority of countries, or not all countries. European solution or unilateral solutions. Now, the current situation with the US withdrawing from the OECD negotiation is a bit tricky because, as you know, quite a few countries either introduced taxation or basically gave the condition. We will give OECD some time to come with a global solution. If OECD doesn't introduce the global solution, we will introduce our national regulation for taxation, mainly of the tech platforms like Google, Facebook, and other major actors. EU has also very intensive debate and very sharp divisions within EU between those who are for taxation of platforms and against this. This issue is accelerating. And then we have digital cooperation. On 11th of June, UN Secretary General announced the roadmap for digital cooperation, building on the report of the UN High-Level Panel on Digital Cooperation. And in a way, he made some sort of a realistic acceleration of the process. It builds on the major recommendation of the panel. It provides a concrete suggestion for action. And it, in a way, reflects the reality of the political and policy controversies that exist in the current situation, especially on the question of cybersecurity and digital governance. Those are, I would say, two key issues which are two elephants in the room. One which just entered the room, cybersecurity, and digital governance, which has been around for quite some time. Digital governance, when I say this is, it is a question like how we basically consolidate or consult about the policies on the contact tracing apps. It's not just the question of infrastructure or ICANN or the other issue. It is addressing digital policy in a comprehensive way, in a way that can address immediate needs of citizens and companies and countries worldwide. Therefore, those are 5 trends: data governance, cybersecurity, contact tracing apps with the COVID, taxation, and digital cooperation, and in particular digital governance, which was slightly accelerated with the UN Secretary General's roadmap. Over to you, Vlada.
Thank you, Jovan, for the overview. And I have two questions. First one is a little bit easier and probably lighter for you. When you go back 2 years ago and you were to enter the high-level panel, and now you come to this moment and you see what the results are. I don't know if it's the right question whether you're happy with the results in a way, or you think we could have achieved much more, or actually this is much more than we expected. What is your gut feeling about the whole process from really personal?
Well, you know, people tell that with the age you get patient, but I remain impatient person, especially when it comes to the public goods and things that can make our rock in the cosmos a bit nicer place to live with, less conflicts and an enabling power of digital technology. That's let's say my overall drive. But realistically speaking, we have made the progress which was in the given circumstances probably the most that one can achieve. And this is why I highlighted my reflection on the report, on the roadmap, as a realistic acceleration. I would say that we could accelerate with faster with a few, if you can call it low-hanging fruits. One is the IGF. It is basically Article 72 of the VSIS agenda, which is official UN document, which provides mandate for the IGF plus, gives us, global community, via Secretary General, space and place to redesign this space and make it more up to demands of the modern time. I mentioned contact tracing apps. You can mention few other things. And I think Secretary General signaled clearly that UN doesn't have appetite or ambition to regulate the internet in traditional way. But it can serve as a platform, and there is no better platform than a strengthened and rebuilt Internet Governance Forum, because it has a mandate which is very difficult to negotiate these days. It has a tradition. We can discuss how successful it is. There are different opinions, and there is a need to have some sort of digital home, but home which will have enough room for everybody, and for governments, for businesses, for civil society. And I guess that on that side, I think we should probably move a bit faster. That's in this realistic acceleration, I would advise for a bit faster move on creating this digital home or place where people can voice their concerns on, especially small and developing countries, which have no capacity to participate in digital policy. Therefore, this is summary, realistic with the acceleration with the roadmap. And I would like to see more acceleration in the coming months, especially on the IGF, strengthening of the IGF.
Now, the second question is harder, as I said, because it's looking forward. And it's building up on that, well, optimism that we can maybe accelerate the efforts. And at the same time, and I'm picking only two of the questions from the chat, and Marco will help me afterwards with maybe more that were raised, which is on geopolitics. There are a number of things which are happening as a broader context, certainly the big elections, and then the escalations of the relations between the US and China. That's what the Richard Hill mentioned. So what can we expect and how can this influence digital policy developments, at least till the end of the year, if not even broader, regarding or regardless even who's going to win the US elections? And then Abdul Jalil mentioned that India has banned 59 applications which are apps which are related to China. They have banned Huawei from the national network, telecom network. There were escalations between India and China. We are seeing EU again reflecting on China, Australia reflecting on China. There seems to be bigger and bigger gap between China and some other places in the world. And that's just one bit of the context. So can you do any sort of a forecast, at least by the end of the year, plus COVID on top of all of that? Can you do any sort of a forecast, your crystal ball exercise with a huge caveat on what's going to happen?
Yeah, well, Vlado, you know that we should talk with the clarity, and this was one of the good things with the panel and roadmap was that we introduced a bit more clarity in language beyond the traditional UN or even, in my view, more dangerous tech language. One great news is that the Secretary General doesn't have even single mentioning of blockchain. Those of you in Diplo know how skeptical I was with the blockchain hype that happened 2 or 3 years ago. That's good news. And in that spirit of clarity of the language, we shouldn't shy away from the reality which is around us. What we have, at least myself, I can speak in my name to some extent to Diplo, wants to increase the chances for some sort of inclusive, impactful, and informed decisions. Now, if you analyze position of all major actors, and I think this is a promising sign, I don't know if it will happen in capitals when people discuss their policy solution. All major actors have strengths and weaknesses, which is the basis for good compromise. Yes, maybe China has certain policies, but China depends on the global internet. It has diaspora of 100 million people. It has ambitious industry, tech industry. United States, there is no need to mention it. Europe is probably the most vulnerable with the weakest industry, but then huge service industry, which depends on digital. Therefore, when you really analyze, I think we stress more differences which exist and which are outlined. I think Richard mentioned a few documents like US strategy towards China. But even in that strategy, Richard, there is a sort of a realpolitik element. We are ready to engage and to discuss issues. Therefore, if we start to this realpolitik, and if UN and other actors can outline these elements, I'm more optimistic than it looks nowadays for the next 6 months. What we have to do is to have a clarity of the language, avoid another blockchain hype. 3 years ago, if you go and question blockchain ideology, you were considered as a person from the next planet. Now we have AI hype. Personally, I don't think that there is a need for AI governance. This is one of my criticisms for the roadmap. AI governance is just what Richard said. There are traditional laws. European Union did their AI strategy, and 90% of cases are covered by traditional law. Therefore, it is just another digital governance with a few areas where there are higher risks and ethical questions, but it doesn't deserve another blockchain iteration. That would be my clarity of the talk, clarity of the position, starting from a reality, not from the hype, and coming to the point where we have a high chance to create a reasonable compromise. But the clarity is the key. And the roadmap is very good in promoting this clarity language. And one line which Secretary General mentioned, which hasn't been in the roadmap, usually, you know me, I look for the few lines. One line which he said, which is very interesting line, is that the business model of tech platforms creates a structural basis for the misuse of data. It hasn't been reported in all writings, but it is really, really an interesting line in the report. And it is a clarity talk. Therefore, all in all, if you reduce the hype, if you speak with the clarity about interests and positions and the core values of the UN around development, human rights, and security, I'm more optimistic for the next 6 months than one would expect it from the, let's say, a reasonable observer of the situation, where you read all of this negative news on the geopolitics, and that's sort of and I will always substantiate my optimism. It's not just the question of inspiration today, but I think that can be justified and substantiated. Over to you.
Thank you, Jovan. You know that we'll call back on you somewhere in the end of December or January to see whether you were right or not. We'll get back to that. But thanks for the optimism. That's certainly something that's missing.
But future is great even today. You know, it's so tolerant. You know, and don't play this video in 6 months. Maybe I will be. I hope I won't be proven wrong. Over.
Thanks. Okay, moving on. We have a couple of more questions. We'll get back to them in a minute. But going forward to what's coming in July, and what are the events that we expect in July and then August, since the next briefing will be end of August. So we have the WSIS online, which was postponed from April, and it actually will start in June till September. In a way, it's a much longer set of events related to the WSIS. Human Rights Council, the 44th regular session, will be in Geneva and online. It was originally scheduled at the beginning of June and then end of June. So now we see it end of June to mid-July. Blockchain, favorite Jovan's concept, Blockchain Expo Europe, postponed. Paris Blockchain Summit, postponed. IGF USA will be online, another regional IGF, which is taking place, or national, which is taking place online. And RightsCon 2020 it will be online as well. A couple of updates from the GIP and Diplo. So what's happening, what you can expect from us in the next, 2 months. A webinar on Corona diplomacy will changes affect future practices, actually happening this evening. Then on 1st of July, the Digital Watch, we expect to be able to launch the next edition of the newsletter, so stay tuned. Next week, the web debate, permanent missions at the global diplomatic hubs, Quo Vadis in 2020. The next briefing, as we mentioned, we skipped July. We'll get back to you in August, last Tuesday of August. And then in September, we'll launch the new Digital Watch Observatory, basically refurbished and in a much more beautiful shape than it even is now. And in relation to that, I actually want to pass the floor quickly to my colleague Daria to update us on, because the Digital Watch is a place where the observatory is a place where many people actually get to these updates and details and so on. This is just the condensed summary. So we're trying to refurbish it and make it nicer. Daria, can you quickly guide us to where we are and what we can expect from the Digital Watch? And then we'll get back to the Q&A after that. Daria.
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you for the floor, Vlada. So it's interesting to hear about the importance of online platforms today, and I will be talking about one such online platform, which is the main, let's say, hub for these conversations that we're having now. What we want to do now is offer like a sneak preview of the look and feel of what we're developing and what is in the last phases of development of the new Digital Watch platform. Which is interesting that in software development, there's even a term for this. It's called user acceptance testing. And while we're not in a commercial setting, such as a company, a software company, we see the importance of and potential of such a format is to ask anew how a knowledge-based platform such as the Digital Watch can really actually serve the communities it is geared to. So especially today, when development is fast and there's not enough time for substantial conversation on the value of the tools that we use, from our perspective, we would actually really love to get your opinion on what do you think the Digital Watch should gear to in the future, and what would serve your needs the most. You can already access the development version of the website on dev.dig.watch, and you can let us know what you think on digwatch/feedback. And now I would like to show you a bit through how the website is going to look in the future. And I would say that the main focus of what we wanted to create was to provide a better and more accessible navigation throughout the digital maze that we're living today. So basically, when we have a huge platform such as the Digital Watch, it's important to have the accessibility of the overview of all the questions that it has. So the main complexity is trying to create a simple way of navigating, which has very clear signs, which offers an input that is something that you could not get in an automated way. It is humanly made, the connections are humanly made, and then you can also kind of have a zoomed in or zoomed out view of certain topics. And one of the ways that we wanted to create this was through sign language, creating icons that are visual, that are simple, and that provide easy ways to create connections throughout certain pages, because there are so many. And when you have a very visual language that actually simplifies the complexity, you can easily navigate your way through such a digital maze. The other important feature is creating cross-cutting issues. This is hugely important today because a lot of content is being created throughout the internet. A lot of regulations are being made, and through different parts of a certain topic, you can actually have different issues emerging at the same time. So what we're trying to do is offer places where you can actually get updates from a cross-cutting line of issues, and also see how they interconnect with the other part of the website. Other than that, we're also offering new ways of reading on the website. And this is a part of also Diplo's culture of providing more research and more depth into how we read the internet, basically. So currently on the process page for the roadmap that Johan was mentioning a moment ago, you can also see the implementation of a conversation tool, which is called Hypothesis, and that helps in communicating across different types of content. And one of the main questions that we started asking ourselves is, what is the place to ask a question when you have a question on digital policy? And this will be one of the key points of the Digital Watch in the future. So we're building a system which is based on different AI models that is collecting knowledge from sources such as Wikipedia, and also the database of the whole Digital Watch, and providing answers to specific questions. This will be a form of an AI assistant, and what its goal is not to create like specific answers saying that AI will solve issues and create answers that we cannot find, but assist in finding clues and hints to the different sources that you can get more information on, and augment the way that we read the internet. And as I mentioned, it's based on models that are pre-existing, and it's let's say dancing with both the opportunities and the lacks of artificial intelligence and the practice that we have while using these tools. So it's finding a way of creating an optimal tool that is not supposedly going to solve issues, but is going to assist in the automation of tasks and automation of reading and distributing content online. So I would just like to use this chance, since we are kind of starting a conversation on what are these tools and why do we need them and in which way are they the most useful. I would like to get a bit of specific feedback on a few questions regarding the future of the Digital Watch. And for this, we will have a short poll. If you want to provide more information, we would love to hear from you on DigWatch/feedback. And some of the main things we're interested in learning about is, how do you interface with the Digital Watch in terms of how would you like to be updated? How would you like to receive the information? Is it just enough to have like a monthly newsletter and the briefing, of course, as a form, or would you like to receive something like custom tailored updates that you can, for example, click on specific issues and then receive automated updates for the specific issues that you're interested in, or trends, of course. And also in terms of notifications and the amount of information that we receive on a daily basis, what is the intensity of the information that you would like to receive? Would you like to be updated once a month or twice a month or once a week even? What is a substantial amount of information for you? Of course, if you have any other feedback for features that you would like to see and ways that you would like to interface with the Digital Watch in the future, all comments are welcome on the feedback form. And that's about it from me. Thank you, Vlada. Passing the floor back to you.
Thank you, Daria, and thanks for the spoiler. I think it is really important to, in this times of paradox plenty, where we have so much of information around us, not being able to navigate it, to talk about how best to navigate it. And I'm sure the Digital Watch is not the ideal one, and it's good to always use the opportunity to improve, particularly when we have the community which is interesting to follow. So another invitation to all of you to help us improve through the feedbacks, improve the Digital Watch. And I think, as we announced in September, you can expect a completely new new look with hopefully many of your ideas taken into consideration. Before moving to regional updates, I just wanted to check with Marco if there are any outstanding questions that we should address that we didn't address from the chat. Marco, briefly, if you wish.
Yes, thank you, Vlada. We do have a couple of questions, one of which I think you have already answered. They are both from Richard. One was from China and US relations, which I think we've tackled already. The second one is on COVID contact tracing apps. He's saying COVID contact tracing appears to rely on the goodwill of two dominant system providers, Apple and Google. Is it viable for the future to be so dependent on dominant private companies? If not, what are the alternatives? I will also mention a couple of comments. One is, again, from Richard, is saying that the proposition that there is no room for traditional regulation of the internet would not appear to be consistent with the general agreement that offline law applies equally online, nor with the calls to apply antitrust law to dominant internet companies, nor with calls to tax internet companies, etc. And as a last comment, I would read what the update that Abdel Jalil, sorry for mispronouncing the name if this is the case, and Amrita have pointed out on India. India has banned 59 apps with links to China on national security grounds. So I would just give the floor back to you. This is all.
Thank you, Marco, and thanks also to Abdel Jalil for mentioning the Africa DNS Forum, which will be held in July online, adding to the list of online events. Jovan, any quick comments on the track application and the question that Richard raised?
No, well, I mentioned the answer to Richard's question. Yes, I completely agree. Let's start with existing law. This is what EU did with their AI strategy. And I think this is the best common sense approach. Let us not reinvent the wheel. If we have data protection, we have consumer protection, antitrust, and this is really important. There are issues, especially in cross-cutting field, where we will need the space to discuss, like this digital home or IGF plus, whatever you call it. On the contact tracing app, I would slightly disagree. It's not a question of contact tracing app. It's a question of our dependence on two platforms, which we can discuss whether it is good or bad. Monopolies are risky, but both Apple and Google play really well in this situation. They didn't want to collect the data. They took the EPFL approach, which basically keeps data on our mobile. And I think generally speaking, tech companies try to use this crisis to get out of the tech bashing phase that existed before, to be on the good side, on public good side, and the other elements. Yes, it is a problem, but it is not a problem of contact tracing apps. It's a problem of two dominant systems, at least, and well, then in China, other systems. That's basically, there is just spillover on contact tracing apps. And before Vlad, let me use this opportunity. For those of you who are based in Geneva, we are organizing today slightly different meeting at 6 o'clock in Jardin Botanique, Botanical Garden in Geneva. You have just behind me the picture of the nice place. We'll continue discussion on the roadmap with some refreshment, and at 6 o'clock at the Jardin Botanique. Over to you.
Thanks, Johan. It's good to see there are other models of discussing today than just online, and which are still quite safe in keeping the distance. And Jardin Botanique is certainly one good idea for that. Okay, moving on to the last part of the webinar, which is a quick review of regional updates. There are a couple of regional updates, very interesting as always. So I pass the floor to Andriana to guide us through the regional updates. Andriana.
Thank you for the floor, Vlada. Our colleagues will now share the updates from their respective regions. First, we go to the Caribbean, at least virtually, where Andre Edwards will tell us more about Jamaica passing the data protection bill and Antigua and Barbuda processing digital assets business bill into law. Over to Andre.
Andre Edwards with Caribbean updates. Data Protection Bill passed in Jamaica. The Data Protection Act 2020, a bill designed to protect the privacy and personal information of Jamaican citizens, was passed in the Senate on June 12th. This bill had been previously approved by the lower house on May 19th and was given the go-ahead by the Senate with 3 amendments. The government at the end of the bill's debate committed to a public education program during the transitional period of 2 years before the bill takes effect. This transition period would allow all data controllers time to implement measures that would make them fully compliant with the requirements, as well as any other administrative processes. Antigua and Barbuda passes Digital Assets Business Bill into law. Antigua and Barbuda on June 18 formally added the Digital Assets Business Bill to its statutes books, providing a new regulatory framework for stakeholders in the digital assets industry, including businesses and clients. Antigua is quickly emerging as a global stakeholder for Bitcoin SV and other digital assets. The laws are expected to provide more trust and credibility to the sector. The Bayesian Group and Bitcoin Association advise the government on the legislation. The law defines various types of digital assets beyond currency equivalents, and it is expected that more real assets will be tokenized using blockchain technology into the future.
Thank you, Andre. We now move to Africa, where Grace Mutungu will highlight the recent election in Malawi, the AFDAC call for a more equitable internet following COVID-19, Zambia's ratification of the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, and South African announcement of a start date for parts of its privacy law. Grace, over to you.
Welcome to Updates from Africa, June 2020, the month where there was a peaceful transition of power and handover of power to the opposition in the Republic of Malawi. Quite historic. That happened over the weekend. But in internet policy making circles, something that has been quite a concern are the measures being taken by governments in this COVID-19 period. And so the Africa Declaration on Internet Rights and Principles, or AFDEC, has issued a position paper pointing out some of these emerging issues. For example, the paper states that the internet taxation, which is something normally that affects the end consumer, is hindering access of the internet for all, and the internet is really being depended upon in these times. And something related is that two countries have put in place measures for privacy and data protection. One is that Zambia has approved ratification of the Africa Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. This is a convention that was passed way back in 2014, but it has not come into effect in the whole continent because it has not received the requisite number of ratifications. Zambia's is only the 6th ratification, and 9 more are needed in order for it to come into effect. And in South Africa, we are likely to see more activity for compliance with data protection after the president announced July 1st as the commencement date for some of the sections of the privacy law, which is popularly known as POPI. And so we are likely to see a GDPR-like situation where companies and data processors will be rushing to comply. But this act only applies to data processing within South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Our next stop is the Middle East and North Africa, and Naha Fati will tell us about Facebook deactivating accounts of Tunisian political bloggers and activists, and about concerns raised about the COVID-19 contact tracing apps that are developed in the region. Over to Naha.
Hello, this is Naha Fathi. I cover internet governance developments in the Middle East and North Africa region. First update in June is regarding Facebook that deactivated 60 accounts to Tunisian journalists, bloggers, activists, and artists who have been notified that they are not eligible to use Facebook and that the decision is final. Facebook further informed them that for safety and security reasons, they couldn't give any additional information as to why their accounts were disabled. In response to the public backlash and demand for a clarification, Facebook informed the Guardian newspaper that due to a technical error, a small number of profiles were removed, which has now been restored. And Facebook apologized for any inconvenience. Yet, there is still uncertainty that the reason behind the deactivation of such accounts is the mentioned investigations as explained by Article 19, MENA Regional Director. Facebook has given different explanations for why it has deactivated a large number of Facebook and Instagram accounts in Tunisia. The second update is regarding the response to the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic in some MENA governments by the Ministries of Health that rolled out a contact tracing mobile phone applications for those who are in quarantine or self-isolation, which is the case in Tunisia and Saudi Arabia. The Bahrain government also requested individuals returning to the country to self-isolate themselves and to download an application that notifies the government if they change their dwelling. Yet, ministers of interior in Qatar and Morocco took the lead in developing and deploying contact tracing applications. Access Now has raised concerns about the legal and policy measures adopted to protect human rights, particularly privacy, data protection, and access to information in the development and deployment of such applications, specifically with the absence of data protection legislation in some countries in the region. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you, Noha. At the end of this quick world tour of ours, we will hear the updates from Asia. Amrita Chowdhury will update us on Thai government approving the draft bill on digital tax, Honda suffering a cyber attack, and IoT Alliance Australia and the Industrial Internet Consortium publishing a white paper on Internet of Things and the Sustainable Development Goals. Amrita, over to you.
Hello and welcome to the regional update of Asia in June. The first update is on digital taxes. The trend of governments imposing digital taxes on companies continues. Thailand has recently approved a draft legislation that would impose 7% value-added taxes on foreign digital companies who earn more than 1.8 million baht per year from digital services in Thailand. However, for this legislation to become enforceable, it will have to be approved by the Thai Parliament. Japanese car maker Honda was hit by a cyber attack that affected and disrupted their services in several countries. However, Honda has claimed that there has been no breach in the data and the cyber attack has caused minimal business impact. IoT Alliance Australia and Industrial Internet Consortium have published a white paper called How Digital Transformation and IoT Can Contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This paper argues that the Sustainable Development Goals should be factored into all IoT projects and other digital transformation initiatives, and outlines 5 pillars necessary for the successful implementation of digital transformation of an organization. These include architecture and standards, security and privacy, shared value creation, organizational development, and ecosystem governance. That's all from me for this month. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you, Amrita. And thanks once again to Andre, Grace, and Noha for sharing the updates from their regions. More details can be found on the Digital Watch Observatory. At the link my colleague Marco will provide in the Zoom chat. This concludes the regional perspectives. And Vlara, I would give the floor back to you.
Thank you, Adriana, particularly for taking us for this global tour. It's much needed in the times when we're in a lockdown, we can't travel that much. It's good really to hear what's happening around the world and get some more different perspectives. This brings us to the end of the June webinar. I remind you that the next one is actually scheduled for the end of August, Tuesday, 25th of August. Quite some time to relax in the meantime. Stay tuned. The next edition of the newsletter will come out soon next week. So make sure that you grab a digital copy for as a morning coffee reading. It's always a good reading. Many thanks to the entire team for making this possible again. And for those of you that are in Geneva, don't forget a nice walk walk and talk on digital policy in the Botanic Gardens in Geneva today, 6 p.m. Thank you all for coming, and see you in August. Bye-bye.